Um, but okay, we're gonna start with Tevilas Keilim. Someone asked me last night if he's not here right now. He actually asked me recently about titling a coffee machine. He said, was this your idea before I asked you the shayla? So I said in the last week, personally, we bought a new coffee machine. There was a new coffee machine bought in yeshiva, and two different people reached out about coffee machines that they bought. So many coffee machines went through our hands in the last few days. And the question really is, it's $1 million question. What do you do about a coffee machine? Because before we even get into the halacha, there's a big problem. There's really two big problems. I'm not sure which is a bigger problem. The first problem is if you take your new coffee machine, which you spent anywhere between $50 and I don't know $500, just telling you the machines that we've encountered recently, and you put them in the mikvah, you number one very possibly will break that machine. That is number one. Why? Why is that? Well, first of all, electricity and water is not a good shidduch. That's first of all. And secondly, because a lot of the newer machines have computer chips inside them, and therefore it zaps the chip. Whether it does, whether it doesn't, we'll get to all those details soon. That's problem number one. But there's another problem, which might be equally as big. When you put your coffee machine in the mikvah, what happens? The water goes in. Where does the water go to? Well, the water actually does not get to the inside of the machine because the only way the water to get into the inside of the machine is if you plug it in and the water gets put in and boils in the center of the machine. So very possibly, you might not even be doing anything by putting it inside the mikvah. So we have two big challenges, but then again, halacha is impervious to challenges, and therefore we have to understand it might sound like a problem, but what do we do? What do we do? So let's just go to the beginning, a few of the basics. Hopefully, through the basics, we'll point out some of the classical issues that people have. We'll throw in some of the classical cases, and we'll hopefully come at the end of the day to know what we could do, what we should do, what we can't do with our coffee machines. It's actually interesting. One way the person asked the shayla was, send me a video of his machine, and he said, well, this piece I could take out. It was a piece that was made out of metal. So do I just have to put this in the mikvah? That was one shayla. The other person asked the shayla, they said, I was told I should sell it to a guy, but like, I don't really have a guy to sell it to. I don't really feel comfortable selling it to a guy. So number one, do I have to? And if I do you have a guy for me to sell my machine to? So that was the other way to ask the shayla. Other ways we've dealt with it in the past, which we'll talk about, is the rabbi told me I should break the machine and rebuild it. So, I had a worker man in my house, and like, what exactly should I tell him to break and rebuild? So these are all the different things people hear, but let's get to. So first of all, we have to understand something very important. We all know there's this thing called a mikvah, and we know that there is two different times in life, in general, that we know about a mikvah. One is for a man, one is for a woman, and the third is for utensils. What's fascinating is that the Tevilas Keilim of a man is never, bisman hazeh, going to be a daraisa. Tevilas Keilim, the tefillah of a man, will never be a deraisa. The tefillah of a woman will always be a deraisa. That's the reason why women make a bracha when they go to the mikvah. Men do not. But tefillah of a utensil, your simple cup, your simple brand new metal contigo cup that you bring to the mikvah, that is a din deraisa. Straight out of pasuk over here, we learn it out from the Anshe Midyan. And the pasuk, if you want to know what has to be toivel, you've looked at the first pasuk over here. It says, Zahav, Kesef, Necheshes, Barzel, Bedil, Oiferes. If you don't know what those words mean, it's okay. There's one common denominator. They are all metals. All metals, and you're all wondering about glass. We'll get there in a moment. All metals have to go into the mikvah. This is a pasuk in the Torah. The basic understanding is, you see over here, we call Rashi. Rashi says Gzeres HaKasav, which means it's a derais. There's a Gemara of Avodah, two different Gemaras over here that are quoted. Actually, it's the same Gemara that came twice. I apologize. Amar Rava, the Amar Kra, he quotes a pasuk. Anytime you have a pasuk, what does that mean? It's a din de'oraisa. We don't have time really to go at length. We'll just point out that there's a Rambam, that the Rambam actually uses the words mipi hashemua. The words mipi hashemua mean, usually, it's a derabbanan. Mipi hashemua, that Chachamim said, we heard, is shemua. The problem that everyone asks is Rambam. It's a pasuk. It's a pasuk. The Gemara says Amar Kra. So what exactly do you mean? Mipi Shmua. Lots of Torah said on this Rambam, But the Aruch HaShulchan quoted over here at the first half of the first page is really the parting line in which he says, Kol Rabbeinu Eskimu de Tefila Zu Hi Min Ha Torah. So Tevilas Keilim is a din d'oraisa. So it's a real deal. It's one of those things that unfortunately, I think, we know we have to do it, but we're like, yeah, whatever, I'll get around to it eventually. And we heard a kula once in our life, maybe by COVID or other interesting times that there were interesting kulas. And we maybe forget that it's a proper d'oraisa. It's a proper d'oraisa. What about glass? So glass is also included in Tevilas Keilim, and the reason is the pasuk continues. If you look back at the pasuk, it says, "Kol davar asher yavoi ba'esh ta'aviru ba'esh." The Gemara darshins that glass has similar properties to metal. What does that mean? Metal you can melt down and you can reform metal. Glass is exactly the same. Glass you can melt down and reform back into that which it is made into be. Therefore, all glass and metal items have to go into the mikvah. Now, let's just understand what happens when you put it in the mikvah. What are we doing? So there's one important caveat that it has to be a utensil that came from a non-Jew. If it came from a Jew, then there's no chi of Tevilas Keilim. And the reason is, in the words of the Shem Shmuel, the Avnei Nezer, it's one mishpach over there, that the way that he learns based in Yerushalmi is that what you're doing is you're elevating the Kedusha. You take a utensil from a guy. This utensil has tumah on it. It was created by a guy. If I now go, I need to use it. A Jew, when I eat, there's tahira. I cannot put something in my mouth that came from a guy's utensil. Now just be careful. This has nothing to do with kashrus. Nothing to do with the fact that the guy might have, no one touched it. It's perfectly clean. It's brand new. But the fact that it was created by a guy imparts an inherent tumah into the item, and therefore it must go into the mikvah before I use it to elevate it. But now, and this is going to be a very important detail we're going to come back to, what happens if you forget? As I'll tell you, one of the examples in the coffee machine that was being discussed was whether you have to table the machine or not, we'll get to. But if you have the old-fashioned ones with, the metal, the glass carafe, it's called? Not a carafe, right?
The drip?
The drip guy, carafe, right? Carafe, that's the right way to say it. I wasn't sure if the guy was pulling my leg when he told me that's how you say it. I didn't look it up. When you have, the glass thing, you put it in, it drips in, you take it out, you pour it out. So that glass thing, everyone in the world holds, needs to go in the mikvah. Whether the machine's going to have to go in, we're going to get. But the glass thing for sure does. So someone asked the following shayla. I just bought a brand new coffee machine, and I just finished brewing my first pot of coffee, and I realized, shoot, I forgot to title the machine. I forgot to title the thing. So their shayla was, so as they were about to pour out the coffee in the garbage, because of course the coffee is garbage, you can't eat the coffee, like, do I have to return the machine? Like, do I have to break it? Like, what do I have to do? So what's very fascinating, and this is going to be a Rosh Hashanah Zalman that's going to save the world. The food does not become usher. Now, this is a hard thing to understand because we just said that there's inherent tumah on the keli. So why doesn't the food become usher? It's a good shayla, lots of lumdus involved over here that we could talk at length. But l'chol hadeyos, the food does not become usher. The food is perfectly mutter. So that coffee is kosher. That coffee you could drink. Maybe you should get it out of that utensil because you don't want to be using something that has tumah on it. But the coffee, if you use an item by mistake, and it's a very common case, you'll have a serving dish and it'll be on the table and you or your wife and so say, oh wait, did we table that? Oh shoot, I forgot. And often the next move is, okay, oh, shucks, we have to throw out the roast, we have to throw out the kugel, we have to throw out these items. No, the food will never be not kosher, which parenthetically, on the side, the world of kashrus, anytime you mess up, everyone asks the shayla after they throw out the food. That's just what they do. I don't want to give a rule because you're going to end up messing up. The food is usually okay. Just leave that on the side, put that in the back of your brain, ask before you throw out the food. It's just not kedai. It's probably about tashchis and create shalom bayis issues and other problems. No reason to throw out the food. But back to us. The coffee is perfectly fine. That's the reason that you have to toivel the machine. You have to toivel an item, but the food inside of it does not become not kosher. Before we move into our coffee machine, let's just go through some very classical cases just to get a little bit of our feet wet. What do we just say has to be toiveled? Do we just say anything metal, cutlery, We'd have said anything glass, a glass bowl, a glass dish, any food utensil. What are the classical items that people ask that don't have to be titled? Let's give those examples. Those are better ones. Oh, we're going to get to porcelain in one moment. We'll get to ceramic, porcelain, mugs. We'll get there in one moment. It's a very big shayla. We'll get there in 1 second. But items, the general rule of thumb is if the item touches food, it needs to be titled. That's a general rule of thumb. Therefore, a corkscrew, a can opener is not created to touch the food. It might incidentally end up touching your food, but it's not there to touch your food. Therefore, it is something called an auxiliary item to a utensil. It's not an item made for food. The words are, it's not a klei su'uda. It's not something utilized in eating. And therefore, they do not need to be titled. Something, I'll just tell you some of the more controversial examples, but a lot of them are going to come into our conversation in a few moments about being electric. Everything's electric nowadays. You have grill probes, those items that you put inside your grill, meat thermometers, grill probes. You'll have food scales. A lot of these items, so we're going to talk about them, they're electric. But a lot of these items, these aren't items that are properly utilized with food, which we're going to have to come back to. Someone mentioned ceramic, porcelain. So the answer is ceramic is not metal. Ceramic is not glass. Ceramic is earth. And therefore, ceramic does not need to be titled. However, every ceramic item, almost every ceramic item, because we live in a very earthy, natural world out there, but most ceramic items you're going to buy, they're going to be shiny. Now, how do they get shiny? It's called, believe it or not, it's glass. They're coated with glass. And therefore, most ceramic items will be toivel l'chumra. What I mean l'chumra is you're not going to make a brach on it, but it should be toivel. And the reason is that the shiny part, let's say your classical mug, what makes it shiny? What makes it shiny is that it's coated in glass, it's thrown in the kiln, and then you use it. I say l'chumra because if there is a scenario where it's impossible, or maybe a fancy china in which you might look at and you might say, it's very thin. Really? You think there's glass on there? It's like mamish, the thinnest layer, something called spray. They actually spray it with glass, whatever that means. Belsky has old tshuva about this. And therefore, if it's a scenario that one's afraid of it breaking or it's a big deal, you certainly could ask a shayla. But in general, porcelain items and ceramic items, we toivel without a bracha. Metal and glass are toiveled with a bracha, toiveled with a bracha. Just something to keep in mind, children cannot, it's a din daraisa, which means, could a kid do it? Depends on if you know that the kid did it. A guy could help you toivel something, believe it or not. This is a fascinating Mishnah, Nida, that if something falls into the mikvah, it works. The act of tefillah could work. However, you have to know when it's the mikvah. So if you're sitting outside and you send your 5-year-old into the mikvah with your whatever it is, well, first of all, stam is just probably not a smart idea. Any mikvah, even a Keilim mikvah, just because they're going to break it. But even if you send your 8-year-old, not necessarily is that going to work. So how do you know they put it in the mikvah? What do I mean? Maybe they just got it wet. How do you know the whole thing went inside? But if you're there with them, they could help you. An important detail to keep in mind. Let's go into, they should not make the bracha. Kids should certainly not make the bracha. You should be making the bracha. Now, there are cases that we're not going to get involved in. There are cases, let's say you have a 10-year-old. What do you mean? The kid's able to do it. And you just want to be outside and you want the kid to go inside. We go more into the Eretz Yisrael world. What do you mean? You want the kid just to go himself with his 3 little siblings and go and type of the things. What's the problem? So the shayla is the shayla in amanis. You have to know that the kid did it. So there's different ways the place can talk about that. If there's someone else there that watches the child, that person could sign a letter saying, I saw it go into the mikvah. Okay. Different cases. But let's get involved in electrical appliance. This goes back, there's a tshuva over here from the Chelkis Yaakov, or Breish, in which he has a hallmark shuva. I mean, he wanted to say anything that is electric, anything, doesn't need to be titled. Why not? It says there, Breish over here, if you look at towards the bottom of the first page, Yesh heter barer l'shtamesh afilu b'loy tvila. I'm reading the bolded letters. Why? He says in us and tam leminag. He says kayvin osa b'tanor, and it's connected to the ground. So he wants to say an interesting kulam that anything that's connected to the ground doesn't need tvila. Now, this is really, again, everything here is large discussions, And is that an allowance? So anyone who knows things about Tumah V'Tayra, there's a unique allowance. The something that's connected to the ground is not Makabal Tumah. But who says Tevilas Keilim is anything to do Tumah V'Tayra? These are big discussions, which we don't have time to get involved in right now. But what's fascinating is the Shevet Alevi over here. Sometimes Chuvas Farm, they talk in very vulgar terms, and you sometimes wonder, like, Shevet Alevi, Rav Vosner, he's a Haimish Chassidish Yid, how do you talk that way? But Rav Vosner, look what he writes. It's bolded and underlined. He writes on the back of the first page, in the second paragraph, he writes, the whole thing that the Chalkes Yaakov said is ridiculous, and he doesn't, he's very upset about it. And he writes, Lanias Taiti Zehevel Uraos Ruach. We would call that this is just Pashut stupidity. The Rav Vosner didn't even want to consider this a heter. He literally threw it out of the base medrash. He said the fact that you plug something in that is not a heter, there's many reasons we could explain this, because just because you plug it in, that makes it connected to the ground? I don't know, I could just unplug it. So there's different levels over here. Batteries. No. First of all, there's batteries. Very good. So that's in Tumah V'Tayra. Yeah, in a Chanami. So there are different levels. I will point out that there's something that's properly connected to the ground. You have water machines, or sometimes, industrial coffee machines that are hooked up to a water line. Mr. Shem will have such a thing. So that, but that is connected to the ground, because it only works by being connected to the water line. Some appliances need a designated plug. It's not just a regular plug. It's run into the electricity. That's something that's more, and that would be a different discussion. There's more aterim in those cases. And we're not really talking about that. We're talking about our classical household appliance. You plug it in, you unplug it, you move it around. Rav Vosner was very upset. And I'll just give you a little bit of history with my personal world in Tevilas Keilim, and it came to coffee machines. First time I learned Tevilas Keilim, we're going back probably about 8 years. So the sugya sort of ended with the Shevet Alevi. There's no heter. So there's no heter. So what do? You tevel it. Eye is going to break. So there's a few things to sort of forced from all the art school books. Lives in Farakwe. So his right-hand man told me, I personally teveled many coffee machines. So he said to me, I'll tell you what I do. He said, I take the cord, I wrap it around my hand. I take the whole machine, I put it in very fast, I pull it out, I turn it around, I shake it all the water, I let it dry for 2 weeks. I've never had a problem. This is what he said to me. He said, I've teveled many machines, Keurigs and espressos, all 9 yards, I've never had a problem. Okay, that's what he says. Just words of a gadol. So good. So that question we're not going to have time to deal with now. There are tshuvas written about that, and they want to explain. Barney's asking. I said there's a second problem, that the water doesn't actually go into the machine. Which, by the way, anyone who has those pump urns, it's the same issue. The water doesn't actually, we all tevel them, right? And then we just let it out to dry, no big deal. But the water doesn't actually go through the thing, because you have to pump it through, and you can't pump it through because it's inside the mikvah. So the answer is it's a fancy Torah that you could only tevel something in the way that you could tevel it. If it can't get through there, that means you must have not have had to tevel that part. Difficult to understand. What? No, that does touch food when it's plugged in. The water goes through it at that point. It's true. It's difficult, but at that level, the Paiskim are Mekabel. That's what Rav 4 says to do. Another eitzah they say at this point is sell it to a guy. If you sell it to a guy, which we're going to get to in a moment, this is going to be the grand finale, is that if a guy owns an item, it's not mine. It's the guy's. So if my cleaning lady shows up and I say, hey, you want to buy a coffee machine? She says, sure. I say, give me $5. She says, okay. Gives me $5. I say, sure, no problem. Happy holidays. So firstly, she might walk home with the coffee machine. So you explain to her, no, it's one of these, ritual, spiritual things. It's going to stay in my house. So what's the problem? The problem is that you all realize it looks like a joke. So the Mishnah Brura, the Taz, screams and they say, you can't do that. It's one big joke. Well, because you did a ceremonious kinyan, this isn't Mechiras Chametz. Mechiras Chametz, by the way, which we've spoken about at a time, is not a joke. And there's legal documents and it works and it's real. This isn't. So it happens to be COVID time. It's very interesting. They wrote into the Mechiras Chametz people's Keilim. If anyone remembers this, it's people that knew Keilim for Pesach and they're afraid to go to the mikvah because they said the mikvahs are infested. Why the mikvahs were infested with COVID, I certainly have no clue, but that's what they said. And so what they did is they put their Keilim into the Mechiras Chametz. It was fascinating things, but that's another eitzah. Either was you need it for Yontif, so they wanted to make it a tonight that the guy's going to let you use it, then you're going to buy it back. The problem was after Yontif, they had announced, by the way, now it's yours, not the guy's, now you have to tevel it. It was a ganze mess. So that is an eitzah. That is an eitzah. Some want to say, to make it more real, put a piece of tape on the back of the machine and write Shaniku on it. So now we know it belongs to the guy. Okay, these are eitzahs, and they would work. They would work. But let's go. Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky has a absolutely beautiful, beautiful tshuva over here. This is Rav Tevilas Keilim, his Talmud in Flatbush, a Meirdik tshuva, which in the next 3 minutes we'll explain, and it's going to really open up our minds. So many beautiful concepts in halacha. Says Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, there's a sugya in Tevilas Keilim called if you and a guy, and if you look over here, it's on the back page under Gimel, it says Yisrael va'akum esivin shulchan aruch shekana kli b'shotvis ein sarach tefillah. I and a guy own something. We buy it together, a proper shutfis. Let's say you have a business. You and a guy, you're business partners. So you own everything 50-50. So do you have to tell your coffee machine? The answer is, well, it's not mine. It says the Shulchan Aruch, anytime you and the guy. Now, why? So we can understand very simply, and the guy over here explains, because what are you going to do? You're going to put it in the mikvah? What does that help? The guy has ownership of it. So what does it help that you put in the mikvah? There's always going to be that inherent connection to the guy, and therefore, the Shach says the same thing, and therefore, there's no way to title it, and you don't have to title it. Those are the critical words. There's no way to title it, and you don't have to title it. That's a Shulchan Aruch. Comes along the Beis Meir. The Beis Meir asks a kasha that I think may bother all of us. He says, why don't you have to title this item that you own with a guy? Because I just told you it's impossible, right? Because if you title it, what's going to happen? You put it in the mikvah. But a moment later, who owns it? The guy. So his tuma, his ritual impurity, whatever that is still connected to the item. Comes on the Beis Meir and he says, so who gives you the right to use the item? Who says that you could use this item? You're right. You have an item that has a problem. So we have many problems in Yiddishkeit. And why is the issue? Just go use it. Frag the Beis Meir on the Shulchan Aruch. Ma bikach. Mi heter lishtamish. Who allowed you to use this item? Adarabba. It should be usher to own a utensil together with a guy. That's the Beis Meir's question, which just brings out something. What do you want to say? Good. Good. So that detail we can explain. Because if the guy owns it 100%, there was never a chi of tefillah. When I own it, there's a chi of tefillah, because I have a ownership. So I have this item that it's 50% I have to taivel it, 50% I can't taivel it. So says the Beis Meir, so just don't use it. Just don't use it. That's what the Beis Meir says. What? Very good. So this really brings in the whole sugya over here. Is when we started, we said that the chi of tefillah is what? Is to taivel it. If we said you messed up and you didn't taivel it and you happened to use it, you did the wrong thing. But are you allowed to eat the food? Yeah. Why are you allowed to eat the food? Because it doesn't create a problem. There's just a proactive, we'll call it a positive commandment to taivel it. Comes in Rosh Zalman Arbach, and he says, at what level are you not allowed to use an item before you taivel it? He says that's not a deraisa. He says that's a din derabanan. It's a derabanan that safeguards you have to taivel it, but that's not the deraisa. And therefore, he says, and he has interesting examples. He says, for example, let's say you're in a hotel that's owned by non-firm Jews. They have a chiv to taivel their items. Says Rosh Zalman, are you allowed to eat on that food? He says, your eating on the food is a din derabanan. You're not supposed to eat it, right? But do you have a potential to go and taivel it? No. What are you going to do? Mr. Hotel, and this, by the way, in Eretz Yisrael is every hotel in the world. Not every hotel, many. Oh, by the way, I'm just going to go take your item and go taivel it. No way, I'm not letting you. So you are not able to do it. Says Rosh Zalman. The deraisa is not in you. You have a derabanan that you're not allowed to use it. But if it's an impossibility, says Rosh Zalman Arbach, there's nothing wrong with using the item. Comes along with Shmuel Kamenetsky. Says Rav Tevilas Keilim, we have a coffee machine. You have a chi of deraisa to taivel it. Are you able to taivel it? No. Because what's going to happen the moment you put it in the mikvah? It doesn't work. So says Rav Shmuel. So this is exactly the case of you owning something together with a guy. You have a chiyuv that you're impossible to do. And what's the halacha? Halacha is you're allowed to use it. And he says there's so many examples this way. There's halacha of Rosh Zalman says that a balkari is not allowed to daven, not allowed to make brachos. This is more, we're not back this way, bisman hazeh, more bisman mikdash. And he says, why? Are you allowed to eat something without a bracha? No. Why not? Because you're not allowed to get benefit from Hashem's world without making a bracha. What if it's impossible for you to make a bracha? It's impossible. Another example would be an einin, God forbid. so it loses a relative. It's impossible for you to make a bracha. You let it eat. Yeah. Wait, why you let it eat? You're benefiting from God's word without making a bracha. The answer is the same detail. There are certain things that you have positive commandments to do it, but if it's a physical impossibility, it doesn't create an isser to use the item. Says Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, based on this Rav Shlomo Zalman, based on this Sifri Shulchan Aruch, if you have an item that's impossible, and he says it's so pashat misvara, what are you going to tell you? No, go take your coffee machine and put it in the mikvah. And then what am I going to do? I take it out and now I'm going to use it? No, it's going to be broken. So what do you just do? You didn't do anything. So he says any item that inherently is impossible to go and put in a mikvah, you don't have the chiyuv in the first place, and you're allowed to go. And he ends off very strong. He says you don't have to. So he ends off so strong. And he says, you know what? You want to be machmer? I'll give you an eitzah. Sell it to a guy. But he says, you know what? Lemaisa, the truth is, you know what's more proper? Medina, you don't have to be machmer at all. Because this is a case that there's no chumrah. What are you doing? You're going to sell it to a guy. You never have chiyuv in the first place. So says Rav Shmuel, he doesn't even want you. He doesn't even care for you to be machmer in all these cases. And from here comes out that why are we being makel? Let's just be careful. This is not the old heter of Rav Braish that the Shevet Levi was screaming about. Now you may want to ask, but why didn't this heter apply back then? And what did the Shevet Levi hold about this? Okay, good tires, good sigas that we could hack. But this is not a simple heter that when you plug something into a wall, it's called connected to the ground, that it's putter. That's not the reason at all. And you should know the average classical electrical appliance, you should taivel. Your regular kumkum, your regular hot water urn, and your regular Betty Crocker, and your George Foreman's, and all these simple appliances, we've all taivel them. And what happens? Nothing. You wait a week, it dries out, and it works. But if you have an item that's going to break, says Rav Shmuel, says Rav Shlomo Zalman, says the Shulchan Aruch, and this is the base mayor's big question. How are you allowed to use it? This is what all the place can get up and scream. And he's actually writing this tshuva back to Dayan Dunner, believe it or not. This is Mr. Dunner's father. He's writing this tshuva to I believe it's his Rav David Alevi Dunner. That's his that's Haley Dayan Dunner. That was his big taina. How are you allowed to use it? We're from Yidden. Who said you go buy such a coffee machine? Go good old fashioned instant. The answer is there's no problem. The base mayor held you can't. You're right. We basking like the Shulchan Aruch. We basking that if something has a chi of tefillah that you can't do, it is a mutter to use. So anytime we have these appliances that you're afraid is going to break, you want to know if you could sell it to a guy, you can do what you want. But lemaisa, it does not have a chi of tefillah. But let's be careful. Back to my original case of the coffee machine with that glass carafe. That glass item, that for sure, it's a separate utensil. That you need a taivel. Now, the other guy that asked me, hey, I could just pull out this random piece of metal for the center and taivel it. I don't know what that piece did, but I don't think there'd be a reason to taivel that. It's a nothing on its own. The machine at large can't be taiveled, and there is something that cannot be taiveled, does not have to be taiveled. And I'm going to end with the disclaimer. We did not just say that any time you don't want to taivel something, there's a heter. And there's no such thing as, oh, Rabbi, I'm only going to use it one time, and oh, I'm going to throw it out, and that doesn't exist. That's a terrible misconception. There's no such one-time heter. The heter is if it's mamish going to break, or I should say better, you're afraid it's going to break because Rabbi Forrest would tell you just taivel it. What? A one-time use item is something else. Disposable pans, that's a different shmooze, and we all know there's a Ramesha, that's Mekel, that's a different story, which we could talk about. So we'll get there 1 second. Yeah, the paring knives and those type of things. If you use it one time, we'll get to that. Well, we can get to that. But lemaisa, the coffee machines, things that are going to break, one does not need to taivel, but one cannot use items one time. Enjoy your coffee.